NCTCA has been around for about 2 years now, just past 2 years and 2 months since we got this thing started. And we've done a lot of good things. We've done some things very well, but we didn't quite get to the mission that we really envisioned. And there's definitely going to be some changes in NCTCA coming into the next year. We're going to have changes in leadership, and we're having some folks that are going to be leaving us. But what we really need to do is to build this community that we've been out helping and try to build that original vision of a coalition. So the title of this meeting is, Where Have We Been and Where Are We Going? And that's NCTCA and the people that have chosen to come here and be with us tonight. Because we cannot move forward in as an effective way that we want to move forward and serve this community and serve this cause. That's why during this meeting we're going to soon get to some speakers who have had some experience, personal experiences that they'd like to share with you. And then after that, you'll see on the table there's some surveys. We've asked 3 simple questions about feedback we need from you to know how to help direct us to move forward. Because my vision for NCTCA is a change in kind of the structure and to get back to that original dream where we become truly a coalition of communities and people, not just going out stomping out these fires, but to create this massive voice in the Barnett Shale that cannot be ignored. We've got to raise that kind of level of voice to make this industry pay attention. And we know we're up against a massive fight against money. How many people can sit through an evening of television and not see a Chesapeake or an industry ad saying how this is all good and wonderful when we kind of know there's a different story being told on the streets? So we are going to go through about 3 speakers tonight that have shown up for us this evening. They have dynamic stories. I want you to listen to them. Then after that, we're going to get to a sort of roundtable discussion where I would like the people to, I would like one person, there's a yellow tablet on these tables, and talk amongst yourself, share. Answer those surveys for us. It'll be so helpful for those that are going to carry on NCTCA to make it everything it should be. So having said that, our first speaker tonight, and one of our battles has been, many of us just came from Lon Burnham's campaign downstairs. Lon Burnham's been a warrior for us on this cause, and we need to support people like that. So tonight, our first speaker is going to be Greg Adair. Excuse me, Greg, I almost had a 60-year-old mind warp. Greg Adair, he is the legislative aide to Lon Burnham. And Greg, tell us what's going on in Austin.
Thanks, Gary. Thank y'all so much for having me, and thanks to all of you who were downstairs. I can't tell you how much it means to us. Mostly, I want to say thank you to y'all, because there's no question in my mind that if anything has changed and will change for the better in the Barnett Shale, it's because of y'all and because of people like y'all that are getting organized, that are getting involved, and are making their voices heard. And it means a lot to Lon and a lot to me to see this kind of activity. Lon's fond of saying that he has de facto constituents and de jure constituents, and you may not be his de jure constituents, but we certainly consider anybody who's dealing with the problems associated with gas drilling in the Barnett Shale to be de facto constituents, and so our office is always open, and we're here to help. I'm going to be very brief. I just want to let you know about a couple of things that are happening in Austin that we're working on, and let you get back to the important work of organizing. One of the things that I want to also give props to, anybody who, raise your hand here if you submitted comments on the rules that were adopted at the end of last year on the new requirements to disclose the chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing. Well, thank you to all of you and to the work that this organization did, because the rule came out much better than we thought it would. Anything good that happens in the legislature, and you all probably know as well as I do that there's not a whole lot of good that comes out, but usually it gets even worse once it goes through the Railroad Commission. Because we know who controls the Railroad Commission, and usually it gets watered down or gutted. But this rule actually got better. It was stronger than the legislation required. The legislation, you all probably know, didn't go as far as we would have liked. Industry was effective in putting some loopholes in there that we're going to have to watch very closely to see what happens with. But two ways in particular, that rule was better than we expected. Senator Frazier, who carried that bill in the Senate, tried to significantly delay the implementation of it. It wouldn't have actually gone into effect, key parts of the bill, until July of next year. And there was no good reason for that other than industry wanted it out of their hair for as long as possible. But thanks to the hard work, and we need to give props to Representative Jim Keffer, the chairman of that committee. He actually pushed hard on the Railroad Commission to move forward with that rulemaking and ignore that provision that Senator Frazier put in there, and it's going into effect in 10 days from now. So February 1st, that disclosure is happening. The other big thing that happened as a result of some of the comments that people submitted is that all the chemicals are going to be available on the Frac Focus website. Industry, one of the other tricks they tried was to get some of it disclosed on that website and then some more of it disclosed at the Railroad Commission, and it was kind of unclear what was going to happen when it got to the Railroad Commission. Lon actually got an amendment onto the bill that required that it was going to have to be public, but it was unclear where it was going to go. People were going to have to chase down multiple sources and multiple sites. Well, the Railroad Commission, after the comments, actually requires that all of it is going to be in one place on that website. So that's good news, and it's a result of the hard work that y'all did and others around the state. Quickly on the air quality front, you know that there has been very little of substance, particularly in terms of requiring actual emissions controls to be put on upstream equipment in the Barnett Shale or anywhere in the state. We went through a rulemaking the end of 2010 that turned out to be very disappointing. It only actually went into effect in the Barnett Shale. The most promising front there, and you may already know, but I want to make sure you're aware, the EPA is going through a rulemaking, and the adoption of those rules is due by April 3rd. That's the result of a lawsuit and a consent decree, and they have until April 3rd to adopt or reject, to take action on those rules. And they actually do require some controls. They require vapor recovery on condensate tanks, require green completions, require low bleed valves. That's by far the best thing that I've seen that's happening on the air quality front. So that's just an FYI. The comment period is over. So thanks to all who submitted comments on that. The other thing I wanted to point out is, I don't know if you saw, there was a blog post on the Star Telegram about it, but right before Christmas, we sent a letter, Representative Burnham sent a letter to Mayor Price about a couple of things. One, when we met with her recently, she didn't seem to be aware of some of the sampling that TCQ has done, and surprise, surprise, there hasn't been a lot of publicity about it, but they found a number of samples with problematic levels of different pollutants, including benzene, and she didn't seem to be aware of it, so we sent a letter to her to make sure she was aware, that of these findings that TCQ has. But the other thing was pointing out something in the Fort Worth air quality study. And I have both our letter and her response. For anybody that wants it, you can email me. I'll leave my cards back here. But it's important to note that TCQ does not use the most conservative values when they're making comparisons to determine the health effects of specific pollutants. If we take benzene, for example, the federal agency uses a much more conservative standard. And that ERG study that the city of Fort Worth did not compare to the more conservative standard. They used TCQ's higher standard when they concluded, oh, we don't need to be concerned about these levels that we're finding. That's something that we pointed out in that letter, and I can get copies of that to you, and we can talk more about that in detail later if someone would like. But so those are the couple things that on the air quality front. The last and most important thing that is something that y'all can really play a constructive role in, and I'm glad I saw the notice back there on the back table, is you all know that there's an important hearing coming up at the end of this month. On January 30th, the Railroad Commission is going to hold an informal hearing, not to be confused with the formal process when there will be formal comments that you can submit. But the Railroad Commission is actually trying to decide whether they need rules on the forced pooling statute. I know a number of people here, Ben and Mary Lou and others here, have been already very actively involved in that and have done some great work coming down to Austin and testifying. But currently there are no actual rules, administrative rules at the Railroad Commission for how to implement that statute. So this is coming out of a recent case where Chesapeake got denied. If you didn't see it, I believe it was Mike Norman. Was it Mike Norman that wrote a really good column about Chesapeake getting denied this request for a forced pooling? And so my understanding is it was Chesapeake that went to the commission and said, "Wait a minute, you're making arbitrary decision. We need some rules." So we all know what will happen if they go through a rulemaking and our voices are not heard. Your voices are not heard because it'll be exactly what industry wants. My sense so far is that at least two of the commissioners are showing surprising amount of backbone and standing up to the industry and to what they're trying to do with these forced poolings. So that's hearing is on April 30th. It's an informal hearing. The first step is simply for them to decide, do we need to go through a rulemaking? I think we do need rulemaking. I think we very much need your voices in that. And we have put together a list of some suggested points that could be included for those of you that want to comment. The hearing is open to the public. Anybody can go down to Austin. Of course, I realize that's not an easy thing for people to do who live here and work here. If you can't, and we're working with Sharon Wilson and OGAP on this, if you want to draft comments, a letter, in whatever form you want, you can send it to Sharon, and she's going to send them to us, and Representative Burnham is going to be there and is going to speak, and we can submit comments for anybody who would like to who can't be there. So
we're going to put out an alert with some sample language and everything. I think it'll be out tomorrow. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll get it.
Great. Excellent. And OGAP is doing great work on this. Once again, I will leave a copy of these in the back, and I can email it to anybody along with my cards. These are just some suggestions of some things that we've seen at some of these forced pooling cases. So please make your voices heard on that.
The date again of that?
That hearing is January 30th. And she has in the papers at the back the actual notice that explains what the hearing is about, what the points are that they're looking at. So as far as what y'all can be doing this year, that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind is what most of you already did for the last hour, and that was go down and support candidates who are on the right side of these issues, who care about mineral rights owners and not just producers, who care about surface property owners and not just about mineral owners, who care about breathers and not just the profits of the companies. And that, for anybody who's been following what's happening in Austin, that's a big part of the dynamic that we're dealing with, is that there aren't a whole lot of people that will do what you want instead of what the producers want. So we need to elect more people that will make the right decisions. So please ask those questions at the candidate forums and at the clubs and support those candidates as you're already doing. The third thing, and this is something that actually I was just visiting with a couple people downstairs about, but you now have a unique experience here in the Barnett Shale. Shale formations are being discovered, it seems like every day around the country, even here in Texas, but this was not only one of the first shale plays, certainly the first major urban play, but unfortunately, you have been the guinea pigs for a lot of the problems that are coming up. We need to share this experience with the other parts of the state that are now facing the same kinds of issues that you have here. This could change the political dynamic in Austin. Even if we don't change the members of the legislature, which I believe we need to, even if we only make a marginal improvement on that, one of the dynamics that we've run into is that certainly prior to now, most of the members didn't even know what shale production was. They didn't know what a condensate tank was. They didn't know how a compressor station affects somebody, a school, or a family that lives next to it. thanks to Calvin Tillman and others, that's a lot more known now. But that dynamic is changing. The Eagle Ford Shale, the Haynesville Shale, shale drilling in the Permian Basin, and I'm just told now they just discovered one up in the Panhandle. But we need to connect with each other. You need to connect with people in the Eagle Ford Shale and the people in Haynesville, and that's a unique opportunity that you have to share your experience and get organizing from the grassroots level so that these members are hearing it, not just in the Barnett Shale, but they're hearing it in South Texas and West Texas and East Texas, and that's an experience that only you can share because you have that experience. You know what it's like to deal with the landmen, to deal with the facilities. So I hope NCTCA will be networking with the Sierra Club, with others that are already working on that, organizing in the Eagle Ford Shale, for example, and that those members from South Texas will come back next session, and this won't be a new issue, because they will have heard it from their constituents, because they heard it from you or dealing with it themselves. So those are a few things that I think y'all could play a very constructive role on for these next few months as we lead up to the next session. That's all I have. There's a lot more going on, but I don't want to take too much of your time because y'all got some important things that you're doing here. Mostly I want to thank you. Keep up the good work. It does make a difference.
You've ever heard of Rosemont Park? That is a diamond in the middle of what a lot of people don't think is very much. But I'm going to tell you from personal experience, being out there and working in that neighborhood, these are some of the proudest people in our city of Fort Worth. And having said that, I've asked a very dear friend who works very hard in that community, has been up against Chesapeake for a gas well site that is right beside Rosemont Park, less than a football field away from a middle school and an elementary school, and Southwest Baptist Seminary just brought before our Fort Worth City Council a proposal to build new dormitories to put students in 300 feet away from a gas well site. So, Robert Snow.
We're a poor Hispanic community, but people at the City Hall know as well. We're not good at standing down to them. I just recently got kicked out of City Hall because they didn't like what I had to say. What I had to say was the truth. Annette stood up before me. She's our secretary. She let them have it. It's got to stop. But one thing in our community that's worth more than anything else is hope. Lon gives us hope. Gary gives us hope. Louis McBee gives us hope. We fended off Chesapeake for near 2 years now. They were going to cut the land and pump the gas nearly 2 years ago. They're afraid they're going to be rioting in the streets. But for me, that's better than watching our babies die. If we stand up for anything, we stand up for our children. And we cannot afford not to elect Lon Burnham. He's been there for us. Lon Burnham has meetings in his office with us. We have an issue with the railroad company. He brings them to the table.
Well, when she came onto the scene, she just came onto it like a rock star, literally. I'm talking about a girl that took her guitar to Arlington and rapped a song telling them how they needed to act in a better way and the industry was out of line. She drags her counterpart, Mr. Benzine, with her everywhere she goes. And Kim Field has done very dynamic work in the city of Arlington and has drawn attention all through the country with her YouTube videos to the attention of the Barnett Shale and our plight, and shared it with this whole country. Kim Field.
It's been a crazy almost 2 years, and Texas Sharon was my inspiration. I was spending one day every 2 weeks reading her blogs, and then I found myself spending more and more time. So if it wasn't for Texas Sharon, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be sitting on that bonus money and blind, hear no evil, speak no evil, but she has opened my eyes, and let's give her a hand. I found some gaps in every line of government. Like with the EPA, we had a flooded site. It rained, and they had already shut the well in. They had just finished fracking, and the city shut them down because they were getting their water from Fort Worth. And so there was 2 stage fracks that were in the ground when they shut them down, and then the rainstorm came. EPA came out and they tested for chlorides and salinity, but they didn't check for frack chemicals. That's one of the problems. They couldn't even come out the same day. They had no manpower. When the Railroad Commission told these guys at the drill site, before you release the floodwaters, use our checklist. They check for a sheen, they check for an odor, and there's some other items I'm not sure of, but they don't send the water off to a lab to check for frack chemicals. So we're not looking for the chemicals. We just don't have that screening in place. The TCEQ, their ESLs, either they're wrong or they're screening for the wrong effluents. We had a TCEQ investigator get sick investigating the Dow Worthington compression station in August. His toxic vapor analyzer came up with 200,000 parts per billion VOCs. His eyes were tearing, his throat was choking up. And when he took his summa canister reading, weeks later it came back, no violations. Well, they're not even checking for methane or any of the sulfides. And he quit. He's no longer with the TCEQ. I don't know if that led to him leaving. TCEQ is not bringing out their mobile monitoring van from Austin to check for the formaldehyde levels that we know are present. Our first responders, I'm worried for them when they go to the sites. Maybe they don't have the right equipment. I know in some instances, if they just bring their Q-ray, their 4-gas meter, it doesn't detect benzene. So they could be going into an environment and putting themselves in harm's way, maybe not knowing they need to evacuate the neighborhood. I was told they need a photoionization detector. I've had one fireman said that they do have that. Another one said that they don't. I've had another fireman go to the compressor station just last week in Arlington to respond to a rotten egg odor, but he didn't bring his hydrogen sulfide detector. So it's just not consistent is what I'm finding out. I'm worried about power outages. Last April we had a storm and the electricity went out, and 2 different drill sites, one in Dow Worthington Gardens and one in Arlington, both had the compressor station. When it went down, it pushed the pressure into the drill sites through the pipelines, and they had emission events. A lady in Arlington had her windows open and she was sick by the gases. The next day her 150-pound dog was stumbling around. She had the teeth chattering, the whole health effects. We needed our first responders there with summa canisters to see what the benzene levels were. We really should have evacuated that neighborhood. It was a learning experience for Arlington. Their 911 operators didn't realize the same thing was happening in Dow Worthington Gardens. They were assuring the people on the 911 tapes, when I was listening back to the tapes, that they were already there. And they're like, no, I'm looking at the site and there's no firemen there. They had to learn that this can happen at more than one site. We have a problem right now with Chesapeake. We've got pictures and video of them having these open frack tanks where they're wafting this white, sewery smelling odorous emissions that, based on what I found out on my way to this meeting tonight, is within the compliance of our city ordinance. So it seems like we're being poisoned legally. And I can see where the gaps are. I've shared a little bit with you on these. One of the biggest things I'm very fearful of is the unknown pre-production emissions. The TCEQ did their inventory of the equipment that the drill sites have, and what they warned us was what this equipment is when the drill sites are in post-production, when they're just sitting there just burping. It's not any of the startup production emissions that they were able to get emission numbers on. ERG pretty much failed at the same thing. ERG took one sample of a drill site and it was an electric rig. No, we weren't using electric rigs. That's not typical of what we've been experiencing. And so we don't know what our pre-production emission numbers are. So we don't know if they're within the 25 tons per year because our permit by rule doesn't include, or at least didn't include, startup, maintenance, and shutdown emissions. And two more things where we have gaps. The Ark Park compressor station in Fort Worth. They're evaporating produced water with all the heavy metals and toxins. And I understand because I called the man that invented the Everest scrubbers that invented this evaporation system, and he says they're not using the scrubbers because it's not mandated in the state of Texas. But in California, they use the scrubbers. So it's an issue with Texas being too lenient on the regulations. One thing some people don't think about is they can take one well and they can use the gas maybe that's called production gas. I call it dirty gas. And they can power compressors with dirty gas. I don't know if that's happening. That's just something I want to alert you to. It's something that you just want to think about it. And then the last thing is I actually had some good news today. I opened a blog from SWAPO Neighborhood Association, SWAPO. D. Hart is the blogger. He's a real estate agent. And traditionally, this is a pro-drilling blog spot. And one of the guys that helps all these people sign their leases and get the best deal actually turned anti-drilling in this message and said he's going to be at Arlington City Council meeting this Tuesday night to oppose it. He does not think that industrial sites belong in neighborhoods. So I just want to tell you, it is a movement, the tide is turning, and we are getting noticed. Thank you.
Sandy, is you still here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thought you were back here. Sandy Dembraber is also from Arlington, and she has been a victim of the shale. You know, there's some people, everybody knows the person that says, I smoked my whole life and I never got cancer, until he does die from cancer. But, you know, there's people amongst our community, and we don't talk about it, our children and our elderly. And there's a certain part of that population that just cannot stand any more toxicity. And people are getting sick in our communities. And I've asked Sandy to kind of tell us her story. Sandy.
On Thanksgiving Day in 2007, a drilling rig was erected less than 600 feet from my home. In January, they were setting off my carbon monoxide detector in the middle of the night. Not once, but on multiple occasions. I kept getting sicker and sicker with the diesel exhaust 24/7. And this went on for 3 years because they drilled 22 wells. I worked with the TCEQ trying to get them to help, and every time that first year they'd come out, we don't smell anything. Where's your equipment? Oh, well, we didn't bring any. Finally, at the end of those 2 years, they started giving me an air sampling canister that I could keep at my home. We did prove with doctor's letters and air sampling and a blood test that showed I had the toxic chemicals from the drill site in my blood. Yet, it took 3 years from the beginning to get a violation issued against Carrizo Oil and Gas. And it was based on a state law. And it was an administrative code that says no person shall discharge from any source whatsoever one or more air contaminants or combinations thereof in such concentration and of such duration as or may tend to be injurious or adversely affect human health or welfare, animal life, vegetation, or property. So based on that law is what I chose to push with the TCEQ, because they were violating my right to live without being made ill on my property in my home. After the 3 years, they finally got a violation against Carrizo. And then in September, I got a letter from Byron Sinclair stating that they weren't going to do anything to Carrizo Oil and Gas. And they used 2 air samples that were taken less than a week apart as the rationale. And they weren't even part of the time when the violation information was gathered and put together. Shortly thereafter, I got a letter from Downwinders at Risk, and Jim Schembleckler had put in a little article to look up about Gulf War syndrome. And Gulf War syndrome was being researched by UT Southwestern, and that shows that smaller amounts of toxic chemicals can make a person sick, even when everybody else in the air samples say, no, it's not supposed to make you sick. The research validated what I was saying, what my claim was based on, yet our TCEQ does not address this problem. And that's one of the major points you really need to have addressed, is how they are addressing their limits that they're using, that saying that the air samples came back within normal range. Because they're not. Because if they were, people wouldn't be getting sick. On my block, out of the 15 homes, or 17 homes, 15 of them were made ill, people in there. And that's not normal if the air was clear and safe. I have now been told that there's a compressor station going in on the UTA site, and so now those fumes don't go away. But we need, as a group, to focus on how do we get the TCEQ to change their limits. The EPA has lower limits, but we need to get the TCEQ with lower limits as well. And that's one of the goals that I'd like to see happen with our group. Because the more people that can speak up about it, the better off we are. That's basically my story. After getting the letter from the TCEQ without a valid reasoning, I spoke to a friend that was a reporter that had written some articles for the Fort Worth Weekly about me. And I asked him if he knew where the order for them to drop the violation came from. And the one thing we have to do is look at our governor and because the probable discontinuation of that violation came from the head in our state. He said he didn't like rules and regulations, and this was a first for the state of Texas, and that's why it disappeared. So we have to continue to support the legislators that want the change and want stricter health and safety rules and regulations, because clean air is important to our health and well-being. Thank you.
She has kept the encyclopedia of information going and has drawn more attention to this subject. She's always got the facts. I don't know how many, there's got to be 28 hours in the day, Sharon, somewhere in your life. But Sharon Wilson, known region-wide, statewide, and through the nation now as Texas Sharon.
Thank you. I wasn't really prepared to talk, so I don't really have a speech or anything, but I just wanted to tag on to what some other people have said. It's really important to work locally, and Texas is what we call a captured state. They are captured by the oil and gas industry. So we have to have strong federal regulations. We need a federal floor that no state could go under this. If you want to go above it, fine. Right now, the oil and gas industry has loopholes to all of our major federal environmental laws, and we need to close those loopholes. Other industries don't get to have those kind of loopholes, so we need to close those loopholes. We just developed, it's very complicated to understand these loopholes, but we just developed a two-page two-page fact sheet that can help you, and if you want one of those, I'll try to put a link on my blog tomorrow, or you can email me to get one. As bad as we think we have it here, the Eagle Ford Shale and the Haynesville Shale, it's much, much worse. Those people are very poor. They, it's economically depressed. Calvin and I toured the Eagle Ford Shale, and it was horrifying. And I'm going back down there in February to do a town hall panel. It would be good to get some people, some people who've spoken here tonight, to at some point go down to the Eagle Ford Shale with me, or to the Haynesville Shale, and just talk to people so that they'll know what's coming and they'll understand the need to organize and get ready for it. When I was at the PSYOPs, the big convention where they leaked that they're using PSYOPs in our neighborhoods and they consider us as insurgents, industry knows that the waste is the next big thing. People are just now cluing into this waste. The waste is bigger than fracking. It's massive, massive amounts of waste. And, there's already a connection with injection wells and the waste, but I have some research under the frequently asked questions of my blog, and I'm going to add some more research about how fracking causes earthquakes. There's industry studies. Schlumberger did an industry study on how fracking causes earthquakes, and they even provide a service so that you can pay them for a service and predict how much and how often these earthquakes will be. So, as they close down areas for injection wells, then that's going to be a bigger problem. And the solid waste is a huge problem. According to the American Petroleum Institute, for every 1 foot that they drill, it produces 1.2 barrels of solid waste. A barrel is, a big barrel. 42 gallons, I think, is a petroleum barrel, is 42 gallons. So the waste is the next big thing, and also the frac sand mines. I don't know if y'all have tuned in on the frac sand mines, but that's another huge use of water. So they're pulling all this water out of our aquifer to process this frac sand, which is a carcinogen. And as they pull the water out of the aquifers, it's degrading the water that's left in the aquifers. Also, I just wanted to say that we need to just really stop letting them get away with some of the lies that they're telling. Like one is energy independence and national security. Yeah. Don't ever let them get away with that. They have just now permitted a 20-year contract to ship domestic shale gas to Asia, where they can get $14 per MCF. Now, if you're a royalty owner, you're not going to get $14 for your gas. You're going to get $2.50 for your gas. The industry is going to get $14 for the gas. They have 7 permits pending, and if they pass all of these permits are granted, then it will be almost 20% of our domestic shale gas will go to Asia. So we're working on doing some things where y'all can get involved with that, and we need to really start pressuring them that they can't be exporting this gas. Also, the dish blood and urine study, the state issued a bunch of spin with that study. And they said industry still uses the state's spin. And they said that dish residents' blood, the chemicals in their blood was the same as the rest of the people in the nation. That is a lie. Don't let them get away with that. Now, I just submitted an op-ed. Well, in fact, some professors in Denton just put out a report And in this report, they mentioned the dish blood and urine study, and they just parroted. They didn't look at the data. They didn't look in flowback, which analyzed the data and gave the real truth about that study. They just parroted the state's spin. So I have an op-ed that should come out in the Denton paper pretty soon. Y'all all need to get that op-ed and take it with you, because when Ed Ireland stands up at Fort Worth City Council and said the dish survey showed, then you can say, no, it did not. That's not true. So that's all. Thanks.
Probably drawn more attention to this, has stood up for his little community, that town of Dish, Texas, which, for reasons I'm sure he did not want to put Dish, Texas on the map, but everybody in this USA now knows Dish, Texas. This man has gone around the country telling the story of what's going on and what went on in his community of Dish, Texas. Great that he spent more time and personal commitment to this cause and stood up for a long time. Calvin Tillman.
Well, I no longer live in Dish, Texas. I now live in Aubrey, Texas. And I have a neighbor who joined me up there, Tim Ruggiero. So he's in the back. He also moved over to our area, which is out of the shale. But I haven't gone away. Still around, still active. One thing that most people don't know is exactly how I got started in this. And I got started in this because pipeline companies were just destroying the little town of Dish. There were citizens who lived in Dish who had a large parcels of property that at some point would be worth a lot of money, and they invested in it to be worth that. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and these pipelines crisscross their property now. And so now they can't use that property for anything. And so I started a resolution in Dish that asked the state legislature to give us more local control, to give more communities local control. And there was well over 40 cities that joined me in passing that resolution, including the city of Fort Worth, the city of South Lake. Many cities were involved in this. There were millions of people who were represented by that resolution. When it came time for the legislative session, there was only one legislator that had a bill to address that problem, and that was Lon Burnham. To an industry that just absolutely destroys private property rights, to an industry that has a larger power of eminent domain than even cities do. Now, I never used eminent domain as the mayor of this, and I wouldn't unless it was just an absolute dire situation. But the pipeline companies don't even have to follow that. That's right. They don't have to follow the same processes that other agencies or other organizations have. And so it was Lon Burnham who carried this in the next session. And it didn't pass. It was shut down by the industry, but it brought the industry to the table. And there was a working group that was formed because of that. And there was some best practices. Some may say that isn't much, but it's better than what we had. And we wouldn't have had that if that bill hadn't been passed. So I think it's important to remember what Lon is. He's a voice for the people that are in this room. And so it's imperative that we keep Lon as our voice in Austin. And I think it's imperative that we keep Craig, the chief of staff, down there as well.
Share your thoughts. Tell us what you think NCTCA needs to be. Give us a report card if you know what we've done in the past, but tell us how you think that this organization can better serve this cause. We need to know. Thank you.
Someday you have to become an engineer.
Thank you very much.